Sorry for being gone again. I thought my mom and I had agreed to disagree. We shook hands on it. I told her that she would see that there's nothing to worry about. Um, yeah, but then the last few days, when I go upstairs to show her something or to talk to her about anything, the conversation just gets turned around into like how horrible Trump is. So I made a big mistake by not being more careful with my words. I had said that I was worried that I was going to, or no, I said that I don't want to go to heaven. I don't want to be in heaven alone. And I didn't mean it as an insult. It wasn't meant as an insult, but I understand like why that would hurt somebody. But my mom said that she's worried that I'm a part of a cult. I understand that like when you take offense to like an insult somebody gives you, it's the fear, like the anger comes from the fear of, it being true. But I'm just hurt that she thinks that I'm stupid enough to fall for that sort of thing. Yeah, I sent her the definition of a cult because like that you can't just be living a normal life and like be a part of a cult. Like that's not how that works. But anyways, the conversation ended with her putting her fingers in her ears and walking away. So I started looking into things like why it's so hard for her to hear that everyone is being manipulated. I get that being manipulated is embarrassing and it makes you feel stupid for believing lies. But when it's happening to everyone and it's worked for such a long time, like it's not just one country, like it's been countries, like it's so many people. So there's really nothing to be embarrassed about. I think that the adults who lived through the changes in the media though, they would be the hardest to convince that they've been tricking people. But I'm hoping that they're mature enough to just open up their minds and their ears long enough just to hear this. I'm sure everybody's sick of hearing about Operation Mockingbird, but it was a real CIA operation in the 1950s where journalists were recruited to spread propaganda on behalf of the government. That's deregulation of media took place between the 1980s and the 1990s. It was under President Reagan that deregulating the media industry began. An example of this would be the Fairness Doctrine, which required balanced coverage of controversial issues. This opened a door to highly biased news and talk radio. Without that requirement, news outlets no longer had to show both sides. They could push one-side narratives, which helped the rise of opinion-driven news. So what was the Fairness Doctrine? It was a policy created by the Federal Communications Commissions, the FCC, in 1949. The rule said that if a broadcaster, like TV or radio station, presented a controversial issue, they were required to give time to the opposing viewpoints, which makes perfect sense. It wasn't about silencing opinions. It was about making sure the public got balanced and honest information. It held the media companies accountable. It prevented extreme bias from dominating public airwaves, and it encouraged fact-based discussion instead of fear-mongering or propaganda. So why was it removed? In the 1980s, under President Reagan, the FCC began to push for deregulation, less government involved in business, which sounds like a good thing. The idea was that the market will regulate itself and stations should be free to broadcast whatever they want. In 1987, the FCC officially repealed the Fairness Doctrine. Almost immediately following, talk radio and news programs became more partisan. People like Rush Limbaugh exploded in popularity with one-sided commentary. Media began catering to specific ideologies instead of informing the general public. So the long-term impact of eliminating the Fairness Doctrine is exactly what we see today in today's highly divided media landscape, with left-leaning and right-leaning outlets echoing their side. Instead of balance, media became about entertainment, ratings, and reinforcing bias. There's no longer a legal requirement to be fair, and many news channels aren't really news, they're just opinion shows dressed as journalism. So the media consolidation, that really would have played a part in this too, because over the last few decades, hundreds of independent news companies were bought up by just a few mega corporations like Disney, Comcast, Viacom, CBS. So as a result, just a handful of corporations control the vast majority of what people see, hear, and read. Okay, it makes it much easier to push consistent narratives across multiple platforms. Okay, we've seen the compilation videos of all the reporters saying the exact same things. This is why that sort of thing happens, is because of that. 24-hour news cycle sensationalism. The birth of channels like CNN in the 1980s, the pressure to fill airtime 24/7 led to more fear-based, emotionally charged covering. If it bleeds, it leads became the norm. Tragedy and outrage get more attention than facts and balance. So I think Anchorman 2, when they're fighting over airtime, and they do the car crash, that's what happened. 9/11 and the war on terror. So after 9/11, media outlets were encouraged or pressured to support government narratives, especially about war, surveillance, and terrorism. Questioning those narratives was often labeled as unpatriotic. This era blurred the line between journalism and propaganda. The rise of social media and algorithms, platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter began to control what people saw using algorithms and favored outrage and division. Traditional media had to adapt, so they also leaned into clickbait, identity politics, and tribalism to keep up. So what changed? The purpose of media shifted from informing people to influencing them, driven by power, profit, and politics. It's not just what they say, but what they leave out and how they frame it. It manipulates perception, and it's not right what they've been doing. It should be fair. It should be like both sides. That's that news thing where it does like the left and the right. I think that is probably the best thing that anyone ever came out with, because we definitely needed that. If you aren't sure what this means, it means that journalists are no different than the people on YouTube who have to give out warnings to do their own research, and that, it's just their opinion. Journalists should have to do the exact same thing because they're no different.